So we've had a Lower Decks Strange New Worlds crossover. How about an Enterprise Strange New Worlds crossover? Captain Archer could still return. Welcome to SciTrek, your sci-fi TV movie channel. So following the brilliant Strange New Worlds and Lower Decks crossover, this rumour about Scott Bakula's Captain Archer returning to Star Trek has been mixed up once again. I've read at least 2 different articles suggesting that this might be about to happen.
Now, where is the logic in that?
The reason why? Well, it does seem that the NX-01 really was a central theme for that episode. You know, it was the fact that the NX-01 was made out of that honorarium stuff that had a nice grey tint to it, that was required to make the portal work to send Boimler and Mariner home. Captain Archer was mentioned a couple of times. Captain Pike is a big fan. So that has got some people to stir up this rumour once again that Scott Bakula is planning to return to Star Trek. But is it remotely true?
You have no idea how much I'm restraining myself from knocking you on your ass.
Well, Scott Bakula is a fan of Star Trek. He has said in many interviews that he would love to return if the right storyline presented itself. So from at least that point of view, it's possible. He, as an actor, has said he wouldn't mind terribly. Strange New Worlds has shown that they're more than willing to take a few risks, and that actually a show where they did jump back in time maybe and saw the NX-01 isn't out of the realm of possibility. And to be honest, Star Trek has done this loads of times before. The Deep Space Nine crew went back and saw the Enterprise. We saw flashbacks from the Excelsior with Sulu in command. We've seen that type of thing a few times. So, possible. The only thing with that is, though, they would have to think up maybe a different way to do it because we've seen it before. So what do we actually know about Captain Archer and Captain Pike? For example, when were they born? When did they die? That sort of thing. Is there any opportunity or any possibility that these two characters could have met? And actually, Scott Bakula's Captain Archer appearing in Strange New Worlds could maybe just be a flashback, something Captain Pike is thinking about in an episode. Well, Captain Archer was born in 2112, according to most of the bio stuff we know about him. It's then believed he died in 2245. This is based on Mike Sussman's biography. This was information that was created and generated for Enterprise, but then was never actually added to screen. So, he died in 2245, born in 2112. Pike was born. Now, if you think it's a little bit fuzzy about when Captain Archer died, when Captain Pike was born is even more fuzzy. One date has it as 2205. Another date, though, has it that he took command of the Enterprise in 2250 at the age of 38. That would mean he was actually born in 2212. Math's not my strong suit, as regular SciTrekkers know. So we're just going to say Pike was born in the early 23rd century. All right? Just leave it at that. We believe he took command of the Enterprise in 2250. He was roughly 38, 40 years old, roughly the same age that actually Captain Archer was when he took command of the NX-01. There was a century between those two events, by the way. The launch of the NX-01 was 2151, and when Pike took over the Enterprise was 2250, so a century. But obviously, if Archer died in 2245 and Pike was born in 2210, 5, whatever, obviously they existed, they were alive together for about 30 years. Archer only actually died 5 years before Pike took over the Enterprise. So, there is a possibility that they met. Now, I don't know any canon that I'm aware of that says they never met. Now, Pike didn't mention that he'd met him when he was talking about how much of a fan he was and how much he'd have loved to have walked on the NX-01. But that doesn't mean they didn't. It would have been a slightly odd thing for Pike in that moment to have gone, I met him. He's great. So maybe. We also do obviously have the time travel thing. Now, this is normal for Star Trek, but we're assuming that would mean Pike going back in time. What if Archer came forwards in time? That is a possibility. Now, obviously, Scott Bakula is a few years older than he was back then. So it would be an older version of Archer that we then got to see in Strange New Worlds. But that's fine. What we could also obviously see, though, is some sort of story where they don't actually meet. That Archer and Pike and the rest of the crew from Strange New Worlds are in a story that actually jumps backwards and forwards. There are events that are happening to Archer in, say, 2220 or 2230 or something like that, that maybe causes a mystery or creates something, or something happens that then affects events in Strange New Worlds. So that we're actually seeing both stories sort of intertwined together. You know, it's jumping backwards and forwards. So there's no time travel shenanigans. There's no, temporal distortions or temporal police knocking around or anything like that. None of that stuff that we get to see. And to be honest, we've probably seen enough in already this series of Strange New Worlds. It could just be interesting storytelling. This happens, they intertwine them together. They have flashbacks, they clip the little bits together, and through the hour of the episode, we get to slowly see both parts of the story come together, and say the mystery gets solved in Strange New Worlds or something else. There are lots of ways, though, to be honest, that they could bring Scott Bakula back into Star Trek. It's one of the beautiful things about sci-fi, is that anything is possible. But do I think it's likely? Well, Scott Bakula gets asked about it all the time, like I've said, and he has said, maybe. Strange New Worlds has shown that they are more than willing to take every risk under the sun. So maybe. But let's be honest. J.J. Abrams' Star Trek and now New Trek have always championed shows like Enterprise. Archer has been mentioned in Discovery several times. The adventures of the NX-01 have been mentioned throughout New Trek. We saw a ship that was very similar to the NX-01 actually in the last Star Trek movie. They've obviously thought it was important very early on to actually champion Star Trek Enterprise. We even see some of the time travel shenanigans getting mentioned in Star Trek Strange New Worlds, very similar to what we saw in Enterprise. So, it does seem that creators of Strange New Worlds do feel an affinity with Enterprise. And maybe that will be the main reason why they would love to see Scott Bakula, one of the most underrated captains within Star Trek for me. It's always Picard and Kirk and blah, 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 and Janeway even. But actually, I loved Captain Archer, and I loved Scott Bakula as Captain Archer. So the final question is, would I like this to happen? Yeah. I think Scott Bakula is one of those just brilliant actors. I've loved him from the Quantum Leap days.
Oy vey, I'm the rabbi.
I loved him in NCIS. I loved him in Enterprise. As you guys know, if you're a regular SciTrekker, I am infuriated with Star Trek Enterprise at times. I don't hate it. I don't dislike it. I just think it could have been even better than it was. I've always thought that it should have explored the beginning of the Federation far more than it explored the Temporal Time War and the Xindi War and all that sort of thing. I wanted to see more Federation stuff.
Do you remember I told you about a Federation?
What about it?
I work with some people who are going to be pretty angry at me for telling you this, but you're going to be an integral part of forming that Federation.
But I now look back on Star Trek Enterprise and I still think it's got some of the best crew, some of the best actors. I loved Trip, I loved T'Pol, I loved all of those characters, to be honest. And I still think they put a lot of really hard work into that show. Some of the technology, etc., was absolutely spot on, well placed for the time period. I loved some of the politics. Yeah, okay, they got a few things wrong. And I think even the creators look back and say that. But they got an awful lot right. And I would love to see Strange New Worlds tipping their hat to Enterprise. And Enterprise getting a little bit of the kudos it deserves. But I'd love to know exactly what you think. Do you want to see Scott Bakula's Captain Archer appearing in the new Strange New Worlds series? Do you think there is a crossover here? And if so, How would you do it? Get into the comments and tell me exactly what you think. If you are new to the channel, please like, subscribe, hit that bell notification. It really helps us out. And you can follow all of these links that have been scrolling across the bottom. They're all in the description as well. And as always, please stay safe, and I'll see you next time.